Mark Gerritsen is Deputy Government House Leader, Andrew Scheer is the Conservatives House Leader, and Peter Julian is the NDP's House Leader. Hello to all three of you. Once again, I'm glad to see you. Thank you very much for making the time for the conversation. Mr. Gerritsen, I will start with you. You and your colleagues really spent the week accusing the Tories of acting in their own self-interest by trying to force an election, but ultimately aren't you just avoiding an election out of your own self-interest? There isn't a poll out there right now, that doesn't show your party would lose and lose substantially.
Look, I mean, if you look at what we've actually been doing in the House of Commons, we've been trying to continue to advance the meaningful policies that Canadians are looking for us to work on. I mean, Canadians don't want an election right now. What Canadians want is they want parties within the House of Commons to be working together. We had a really good arrangement with the NDP where we accomplished a lot together. We still had a year left in that, and they chose to get out of that deal for their own political self-interest. So, I mean, we're focused on Canadians. We're going to continue doing that, and we're going to continue fighting to enshrine the policies that we brought into this point, but to further advance more objectives for Canadians.
But does that actually address the moment that Canadians find themselves in, that they expressed so clearly to your party in the most recent by-election in Montreal and in Toronto at the outset of the summer? The safest Liberal ridings in the country signaled to your government that keeping on is not meeting the moment for them. Why aren't you putting more on the agenda right now?
Well, I mean, like we've done a number of things within the last year. I mean, pharmacare, dental care, national child school food program. I mean, like we've been working on so much. The reality is that what Canadians want is they want our parties to be working together to advance their interests. That's what we've been focusing on. We had a really
But what if they feel like that you're not advancing their interests? Well, is that not the message they're sending you? And I know that your party often, counters, oh, the polls are just the polls, but the polls have now been borne out in 2 by-elections in some of the safest seats the Liberals have ever had. You've lost both of them.
We will continue to advocate on behalf of Canadians. We'll continue to put our agenda forward. When we look at the by-elections, yes, there's definitely an opportunity there to self-reflect, to understand, what is going on, how we need to reposition ourselves. But it doesn't mean we're going to give up. We're going to keep fighting for Canadians. That's what we've been doing this whole time.
May I ask, what does that mean? And why is the message received from these by-elections to your party not, we need to do more, not just more of the same?
Canadians right now aren't in a mode where they're looking to make a decision on government. We've had some by-elections. The voter turnout in those by-elections is significantly lower than a general election. When we get to a general election, we'll have the opportunity to present to Canadians exactly what it is that we want to continue to do to fight for them. In addition to the incredible stuff that we were able to do with the NDP, as I already mentioned, we did a lot together when you look back on it. Why the NDP decided to abandon that agreement to play politics alongside the Conservatives, I mean, it speaks volumes to their ability to
maybe because they've lost faith in your government, but
it speaks volumes to their ability to resist the political pressure from the Conservatives. They caved to the Conservatives in their demands. We saw that within the last month.
I want to bring in your colleagues from the Conservatives and the NDP. Mr. Scheer, I'll start with you. Literally every other opposition party in the House of Commons expressed this week that they collectively believe, even though things are bad under the current Prime Minister, that they'll be even worse if your party forms government. Shouldn't you take that to heart?
Well, taking advice from political parties who all agree with each other that the carbon tax should be quadrupled, rising to 61 cents a litre. All of those other parties agree that there should be even more lenient sentences for dangerous and repeat offenders. I mean, what we're dealing with is the Canadian people are passing judgment on this Liberal government that doubled their housing costs, devalued their paychecks, unleashed crime and drugs into our communities, and they're saying we don't want that anymore. So only the Conservative Party is offering something different. All 3 other parties are offering just more of the same, and we saw that this week when sellout Jagmeet Singh turned into stuntman Jagmeet Singh, when he completely reversed himself, swallowed himself whole after a very dramatic event where he ripped up the agreement with the Liberals. He completely caved and showed that he was just a phony and a fraudster. And he's going to continue to keep Justin Trudeau in power so he can continue to raise your taxes, let dangerous criminals into our communities, and double housing costs. So only Conservatives are offering something different.
I have to push back on some of the things you said there, respectfully, Mr. Scheer, because the carbon tax is not quadrupling. It increases by $15 a ton as of April the 1st. No political leader has said that they want repeat offenders back out on the streets. You can criticize the policies, but it's not fair to say that they have said, let's put the repeat offenders on the streets. Just one second, let me finish my question, and then you can go right ahead. But more to the point, what they have criticized your government for is what they say will happen, your party for, pardon me, is what they say will happen if your government, I'm going to put the specifics to you. Mr. Singh this week said that a Conservative government would take away your pensions and take away health care. You can answer very plainly right here if that is the case. Do you plan to change pensions for Canadians, to remove them in any way, or to cut health care transfers to the provinces?
Of course not, Vashi. But let's take a look at what you said, because I've got to fact check you on that. The NDP voted in favor of Justin Trudeau's legislation changing Canada's bail policies to force judges to be more lenient on dangerous and repeat offenders. That had the effect of releasing more dangerous criminals into our community. That is what caused the crime crisis that is going on in so many communities across the country. Justin Trudeau also, supported by the NDP, brought in policies that used your tax dollar to fund dangerous opioids being distributed in our communities. And police forces across the country are citing those two factors as to why they're finding fentanyl more and more, why people who are addicted are trading government-funded narcotics for even more dangerous drugs. So, you know, this isn't, the problems facing Canadians didn't come in like a cold front like the weather. They are a direct result of Justin Trudeau's policies. That's why this Liberal government is unpopular. The Liberals aren't unpopular right now because Justin Trudeau has bad breath or ran over your neighbor's dog. He's unpopular because he doubled housing costs, devalued people's paychecks, and unleashed this crime crisis on Canadians.
Scheer, I'm not abdicating responsibility from the government.
But you asked the question.
Yeah, but I can.
You asked the question about why we should listen to the other parties. The other parties, the NDP, agree with the Liberals. They would do more of the same. They are pushing the government to do even more of the same types of things that cause the problems that Canadians are suffering from.
So
that's why we're saying, look, if they are so sure, if they are so sure about their policies, let's put it to the Canadian people and let them decide.
Okay, but all I'm saying is when, for example, you say that they want repeat offenders out on the street, and you reference that legislation that was aimed at addressing a court decision that talked about an overrepresentation of minorities in the prison system and in the justice system, that legislation was intended to address that court decision. You are right to point out
You're being very generous.
No, and I'm not finished. You're right to point out, Mr. Scheer, that it did have a negative impact, and that many law enforcement representatives, as well as justice system representatives, came forward and said, even local politicians in BC, I went hard at the justice minister at the time. However, there has been new legislation that was introduced at the behest of premiers across the country that is meant to address the exact same thing that you're talking about. So it's not entirely fair the way that you're characterizing it.
Well, you are being extremely generous, Vashi, as with your interpretation of that. There is nothing forcing the Liberal government to be that generous to dangerous and repeat offenders. And there's the so-called legislation they brought in afterwards aimed at addressing it doesn't actually do it. And we've got that feedback directly from law enforcement and Crown prosecutors across the country. We're talking about people who steal cars in the morning, get arrested. Because of these new bail changes, they are released on the same day, and they often reoffend in the very same 24-hour period. That's not my opinion. I'm not sure why you want to have that generous of an interpretation of events. The fact of the matter is,
it's not
Trudeau
generous. I'm just saying it's not as easy as you paint it.
Those changes, and a direct result of that, we saw crime rates increase, and now we have dangerous opioids in our streets. That's another thing. Nobody forced the Liberal government to use your tax dollar to pay for dangerous opioids.
And I'm just going to take that point, and I do want to bring it to the NDP. Mr. Julian, this month your leader has said the Liberals, and I'm going to quote here, are weak, selfish, beholden to corporate interests, quote, have abandoned Canadians, quote, don't deserve another chance. Yet your party did exactly that and will do exactly that this week. You're giving the government another chance. Why should Canadians trust anything your party says?
Well, first off, of course, we're proceeding vote by vote like we did under COVID that benefited so many Canadians. The NDP was able to force supports for small businesses, people with disabilities, seniors, families, the sick days. All of these things came as a result of the NDP negotiating vote by vote. The reality is the Conservatives aren't really serious with this stunt. I mean, they're scheduling the vote at the same time as the Senate is having an important vote on pharmacare. And that is going to help 6 million Canadians who have diabetes with diabetes medication and devices.
But respectfully,
I did want to point out one thing. I mean, Elma Transcona and La Salle Verdun both rejected the Poilievre agenda of cuts handily earlier last week, and I think that shows that Canadians are listening, and they don't like the Poilievre agenda, which is why Conservative support is softening.
Okay, but respectfully, when you talk about, for example, going vote by vote, or that this is all of a sudden a support for the government because of the issue of pharmacare, I interviewed your leader the day that he ripped up that agreement, and I put the issue of pharmacare to him. Why are you doing this if pharmacare isn't sealed and dealed? He said it is done. It's through the legislature. It's just before the Senate. It's the government's problem if they don't go forward with it. So you're kind of changing your tune about trying to justify how you can say one thing about the government and then end up continuing to keep them in power. And when you criticize the Conservatives, for example, for making stuff up, you're also getting out there, Mr. Singh was this week, accusing them of taking away Canadians' pensions, not based in fact at all. And you heard from Mr. Scheer right now that they're not going to do that.
Oh, well, actually, I lived under the Harper government. We all did. We saw they took away seniors' pensions. They basically obliterated 2 years of seniors' pensions and forced people to work longer.
That's right.
But that's not. But is it fair to say because it happened before, it'll happen again?
Yes.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the Poilievre agenda is cuts. It was rejected in Elmwood Transcona. It was rejected in Montreal. What we're seeing is Canadians, the more they find out about the Poilievre agenda, the less they like it. And that agenda of cuts is something that Canadians are rejecting.
I just have a few more seconds, though. So basically, are we to interpret from this that you'll never vote against the government, which is exactly how the Conservatives are framing it, that this ripping up of the agreement was false, was fake, was phony? I mean, there's nothing in what you or your leader are saying that gives me any reason to believe, or Canadians watching, that you're ever going to oppose anything they do.
Quite frankly, we've opposed a number of things that the Liberals have done that Conservatives have supported. And you're seeing the Liberals criticizing us for ripping up the agreement, and the Conservatives trying this bizarre narrative that basically speaks to the fact that they're sore losers in Elmwood Transcona. We are proceeding vote by vote. That's what we did in the last Parliament, and it was to the benefit of all Canadians that we were able to leverage our vote to make sure that good things happen for Canadians.
But you gave your vote for nothing this time.
Pharmacare is going to be, as a result, benefiting 6 million Canadians with diabetes and 10 million Canadians who use contraception, who need contraception.
But Peter, we could have had another year to make sure that all those programs that you talk about are very safe and secure. And I agree completely with you. Pharmacare is important, dental care, national school food programs. These are all incredibly important. But your party chose to leave our agreement where it provided security for those programs.
But doesn't that again speak to the weakness of your party, that the NDP felt associating with you was so dragging it down that it had to leave the agreement?
No, I think that the NDP saw is doing this all for politics, which is what is extremely discouraging about it, is because we had a good relationship where we worked well together, and then through this stunt of Mr. Singh coming in and talking about tearing up the agreement over and over, the reality is that agreement was delivering really good and really important things for Canadians, and I know that Mr. Julian knows that too. But now what they're doing is they put us in a very precarious position where we don't know. Nobody knows. Canadians don't know what the.
Are you really worried about it? Because they're going to sound like they're going to side with you.
I'm definitely worried about these programs that are out there that I know my constituents and Mr. Scheer's and Mr. Julian's constituents are relying on. People who finally have dental care for the first time. They run the risk now of having that canceled by Conservatives, because we know Conservatives will get rid of those programs. So it was with Mr. Julian's party that we had an opportunity to actually hold on to this.
And I can see Mr. Scheer and Mr. Julian both want to jump in on that. Mr. Scheer, you can be unequivocal. They're accusing you of taking away all of these programs. Will you or won't you?
Dental care in particular, Andrew.
Yeah, listen, Mr. Garrison himself spreads misinformation. He has had to make it a very embarrassing apology for a false accusation. He's got a pinned tweet on his account right now where he had to completely just prostrate himself.
But
and
what are you going to do
apologize
about dental care,
making
Andrew?
false accusations? So it's no surprise that they come up with these phony things to scare Canadians. We've talked about cutting government waste, the $35 billion infrastructure bank, the hundreds of millions of dollars to high-priced consultants. And we know for a fact the impact of Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government's policies. They are raising the carbon tax. And when you factor in the fuel standard, carbon tax 2.0, we're talking about a 61-cent a litre hit to Canadians at a time when everyone is struggling from the cost of living crisis that the Liberals caused with all their money printing and borrowing. So this is the choice before Canadians. The more of the same approach, raising taxes, devaluing paychecks, and soft on crime approach that is causing so much hardship in Canada, or the Conservative approach, which is to axe the tax, fix the budget, build the homes, and stop the crime. And if the Liberals and NDP are so sure that Canadians prefer their more of the same approach, why don't we put it to the Canadian people? Why don't we let Canadians decide in a carbon tax election and let them make the ultimate choice?
Yeah, quickly, I'm going to give Mr. Julian the last word just because it's fair on timing, but I would quickly just point out that I understand the point about government waste, but if you're looking at eliminating a $40 billion deficit, there's going to have to be some bigger line items like program spending that will have to be attacked, which is why I think you're getting questions about what Conservatives would keep or cut. Mr. Julian, final word to you, and it's actually on what Mr. Gerritsen was saying, and Minister Duclos earlier on this program pointed out that 4 million Canadians will become eligible next year for dental care. Is your party going to support the government to ensure that that goes forward, or are you willing to risk that?
First off, we're doing it vote by vote, as I mentioned, and we're bringing real benefits to Canadians. The reality is, Mr. Gerritsen says, well, you know, the NDP forced us to do all of these things, which is true. Every single thing that the Trudeau government can point to was a result of NDP pressure and the pressure from Jagmeet Singh. But when it comes to food price, bringing an end to food price gouging and gas price gouging, and bringing an end to this free-for-all where we provide funding through public funds to big corporate landlords and don't fix or put in place any obligation around not raising rents, the Liberals refuse to go there. And so we see this. The Liberals simply are too beholden to the corporate lobby the same way the Conservatives are. And this is why I'd like to mention the Conservative background. I lived under the Harper government where they slashed pensions, where they slashed veteran services, slashed healthcare. It was devastating. And the impacts are still being felt today. The Conservative government is a government of cuts. And at the same time, they started the practice of high-priced consultants. We saw the scandals coming out during the Conservative time, and the massive amount of money, $30 billion a year, according to the Parliamentary Budgetary Officer, that goes offshore. This is tax dollars that goes offshore as a result of the infamous Harper tax haven treaties. It was a devastating, horrible government under the Conservatives. I think Canadians are increasingly aware of that. That's why they were rejected in Elmwood Transcoda and in Montreal.
I'll just quickly end with one final fact check about consultants, that they did go up under Harper, but not nearly at the speed they've gone up under the current government, the government, of course, which you kept in power for 2.5 years. I'm going to leave it there. As you can see, we appear to have some technical difficulties in Halifax with the connection to Mr. Scheer, so I'll conclude the conversation. Mr. Gerritsen, Mr. Julian, and of course, Mr. Scheer, thank you so much to all three of you.